Welcome to Leadership Reimagined. I'm your host, Cassie Crosby. Today, I'm joined by Virginia Schaefer, founder of the Lady Oyster, Maine's first oyster culinary tour company. After more than a decade in corporate travel leadership, Virginia made the leap to build a purpose-driven business rooted in sustainability, storytelling, and the sea. Her story resonates right now, especially for leaders rethinking what meaningful work really looks like. We'll explore the courage it takes to start over and what oysters and oceans can teach us about leadership and living a life of purpose. So, Virginia, welcome. It is great to have you.
Thank you, Cassie. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Awesome. All right. So, I want to start with you where I start with everyone, which is please tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got into the work you do today.
It wasn't a straight shot by any means. I started a career in marketing and then migrated into sales for a travel company. I really love to travel, did a lot of that when I was in school, and just felt like I wanted to move into that industry, which was great. I entered the corporate travel industry, which is where we manage large companies' travel programs. So, however, their business travelers need to move about the world. And I was managing sales for large contracts, which was the adult job of people who want to get into travel. It felt right at the time. And I was there for 10 years. That company was a wonderful company to work for. But you realize when you go up the ladder of sales leadership, that is a high burnout culture. And we were at a point where when COVID hit, our company had to let go of 60% of our staff, which left a small cohort of the rest of us who really had to pick up all the pieces. And I will say, when you're working in sales, in contracting, the work doesn't change, but your income does when no one's traveling. So there was just a lot of drivers that were hard at that time. And I was there for a few years just trying to work that out. In the meantime, I had started this oyster blog, and this sounds so crazy, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I just realized after a while I needed a hobby. I had poured everything into my job, and all of my friends were at work. And I didn't have a lot of interest outside of it. And so I was sort of thinking, I need to reconnect with the natural world. I need to find something tangible again for myself. And that's just really how I fell on oysters, a food I've always loved. And my grandfather was a commercial fisherman for a while. So I had some wonderful memories as a child of him bringing these like gnarly rocks home and shucking oysters for us. So that's sort of how it all began. And I was probably into that for about 5 years, just writing about oyster farmers, getting out on mud flats, getting out on skiffs, like randomly calling up people to be like, can I just understand your life? And then here we are today, having launched into oysters myself. So it's been a journey.
Yeah. I think it's relevant to ask you as I think about, this experience you had of losing 60% of your peers, the people you work with. What did that feel like? And I'm curious because I see that so much today. Obviously there's what's happening in the government. A lot of companies are losing people. What was that like to lose 60% of the people you worked with?
It was horrific. We had leaders who had to leave the company themselves because of how many conversations they had to have of letting go of people. It was almost too stressful for them to handle. And then there's a period of mourning where these people become your friends, especially after so many years of being in the same company. You develop some really close relationships. So it's not just like, bye, see you on LinkedIn, it's you're losing some family as well. So I will say it just takes an emotional toll on you, in addition to what everyone was already going through in COVID at that time, which was just that isolation and that feeling of helplessness. So it was not easy to be in that industry by any means.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. What was the moment that you knew I just can't keep doing this? I have to do something else.
Oh gosh. Well, there were a series of moments actually. The year prior, I was going through a high level of stress and I knew I needed a break. I took FMLA. I found myself a great therapist and started
Yeah.
having some conversations of taking some time off. And I took 2 months where I just went back to gardening over the summer and sort of tried to reconnect
Yeah.
with myself a little bit. Went back to work for another 6 months. And that's when I was just like, wow, I don't really feel like I belong here anymore. So simultaneously at that time, I've been saving a lot of money just sort of in the back of my head. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I don't know where I'm going to go, if it's another job in this industry or not, but I'm just going to buffer myself as much as I possibly can for what that change could look like for me. And then the final straw was I went to apply for a new position, a strategic global position, and I didn't get it.
Mm.
And that's okay. It was like almost a blessing in disguise. It was
Yeah.
almost like I let myself go, and
Yeah.
just be like, this isn't the path for me anymore. The universe didn't allow that to happen, and probably for a reason. So that was when I knew.
Wow. And, I also took a pretty big step out of my career. And what I hear so often from people is like, wow, that's so brave. But there's this whole other part of it, which is the actual act of walking away. So just to help people understand, what is that part they don't see? What does it really feel like? And what does it mean to make such a significant change in your life?
Well, when you're about to leave and no one else does, that's a hard emotional feeling, I think,
Yeah.
of carrying, especially when these people you've known for so long and they've been a part of your career story. So I think that is always hard for anyone to carry. I took some time off once I left my job. I didn't have anything lined up afterwards. And I look back and I'm like, "Oh, I wish I did." Even if it was just like working at a bookstore for a little while or something
Yeah.
that could kind of give me some structure. I think what people don't realize is when you leave a job and you don't have anything in front of you, you wake up every day kind of like, what do I do now? How do I structure
Yeah.
my day? No one is telling me to be anywhere at 9 a.m. So there's I guess, an oppression and freedom is a privileged thing to say in so many ways, but at the same time, really hard to grapple with when you've been in this sort of corporate structural environments for so long.
Mhm.
And then the last thing I will say is if you are about to take some time off, what most people don't see is the amount of Excel work you're doing on your budget day in and day out. Do I really need this? What are
Yeah.
every single dollar you're working down to get your life in a position where you can afford or stretch your savings as far as you can. So it's a lot of finance too.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you talk about almost a period of relearning. It's like you leave your career, you go into sort of a free fall where you were so encumbered, and then all of a sudden the oyster is your ocean, so to speak, right? And then you really do have to figure out, what does my life look like? What do I want to do? How does my schedule look? Like, how did you figure all that out?
I wanted to just hit the ground running as soon
Yeah.
as I left. You just
Yeah.
feel like you're already on a bicycle and you don't want to stop the bike because if you do, you're too scared of what that looks like. I had to actually learn that stopping and sort of digging my own hole and jumping in it is what I needed. And I just needed to sit in the hole for a while and kind of rest. So I took 8 weeks of purely just waking up, making a coffee, kind of reorganizing my day, getting out in the yard, taking on chores that my husband and I split a little bit more just to sort of have that structure.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, now I need to get back into time blocking, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to build, and reorganizing that way. And I had been working for a couple of years already on a book. So I just started writing. Like I made every day a writing practice. And that was, even if you're not doing it for the intention of writing a book, I would say that getting your thoughts down on paper is such a good way to start to restructure your day as well.
Yeah. I had someone say to me recently, being an entrepreneur is so freeing. You can work any 12 hours of the day you want.
Yes.
I was like, yes, totally.
There's another quote I heard that was like, oh, you hate your boss, wait till it's yourself.
Yes. Get some compassion from that person, right? Oh,
Mhm.
that's awesome. And so now you're on the other side of it. You're doing your own thing. You're writing a book. Incredible. Tell me a little bit about that. I'd love for you to share that portion of it.
Yeah, it's been about 9 years since I sort of started an oyster blog and calling up that first
Mm.
farmer to get out on a mud flat and just seeing what it was like to grow an animal in the water. I had no idea what that looked like. It was such a wonderful catharsis being out there with somebody who was so in tune with the natural world that
Mm,
I was so removed from. And so I just got addicted to that. And over the years, I just kept trying to get out to as many places around the country and even the world as I could. And it ended up being this experience where people were so dedicated to their craft. They knew what they were passionate about, and I didn't. I was going
mhm.
through these wishy-washy feelings of what do I want to do with my life? And they were reiterating over and over again how this world changed them. And so over time, just by osmosis, I was changed too by them.
Yeah.
And they all came from really different places, where their identities were wrapped up into this animal in very different ways, whether that was for environmental reasons or socioeconomic reasons or restoring heritage in a way that we had lost. So there were just these beautiful stories that touched every kind of component of life. So when I had started blogging, there were some stories I was kind of reserving for a project. Like this one, I'm keeping this one. And that's how when COVID hit, I needed a deeper project. I wasn't able to travel anymore. So the book just naturally evolved to being something I could work on and sharing these wonderful stories of people on the coast. And I just thought it was such a subculture that was really unique that most
Yeah.
people won't understand or know about. So it was really fun writing that too.
I feel like there's a lot of those on the seacoast, which is what I love about Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maine is such a beautiful place, and there's such a support network for coastal communities.
Yeah.
I love. And we're only, as our business grows into gastronomic tourism, the whole essence of that is showing people what is so special about Maine, right? So that's
Yeah.
what we do now.
So important. And as you're doing this work, what are you learning from the ocean, from oysters, from the people that you're communicating with and connecting with that's reshaping, most importantly, how you understand leadership and living a life of purpose?
Yeah. So what Lady Oyster does now is we have three different verticals. We've got sensory dining. So it's like guided sommelier tastings with oysters, which is really an amazing hour and a half experience with wine and oysters and taking in nature.
Yeah.
We have a sea farm tour where we take you by boat. You get to learn about how oysters are farmed and grown in the water. You get to cull them, shuck them, pour them out of bags, which is something that people so rarely get the opportunity to do. And then the last is our seafood retreats, where it's the more immersive 4-night experience where we're cooking for you for every meal and
Wow.
taking you out on the water to meet farmers. And I think through all of that work, what I've learned is that there is a clear connection people need between one another. There's storytelling that really feeds our soul, and that is sometimes lost at the restaurant. You're served a meal,
Yeah.
you're chatting, but you're not really understanding why and how that was created. So there's a deeper appreciation for just this really tangible way of living, and something I just really didn't really understand until I got into this.
Yeah.
Oysters are also a super peaceful animal. They're every oyster filters about 50 gallons of water a day. They're adding to our environmental services, saving us like nitrogen removal services from water treatment plants. They're helping seagrass grow and bringing back birds and biodiversity. So we get all of these amazing benefits by this one animal. And I feel like our business really gets to do no harm, but actually do good. And that's a
Yeah.
really positive feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. I do feel like just in general, we've become very disconnected from our food. It's something that in my other life, when I'm not coaching and running a business, I think about a lot. I've been doing some work on a farm here in Maine and trying to bring some community members together and sort of connect people with the food they eat because I just think the grocery store experience is totally like we're devoid of where our food comes from and how it's grown and how it all comes together.
It's so true. And, it's to a point now where, even we just expect food to be that way too, always
Mhm.
prepared. And just there's a deeper lack of understanding about even seeds and biodiversity, and how we're eating and what that culture should be for us, and what should be enriching our bodies.
Yeah.
And I think through the work that we try to do is to just remind people of those wonderful benefits, whether it's health reasons or just, emotional benefits. So
Yeah.
and it's a good feeling to be on that. It's sort of like moving into the future while really reflecting on our past.
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly an appropriate time to be thinking about it and will become even more important to people as this world continues to change. And on that note, something I do like to ask everyone I have on, it's really about the challenges you're seeing in the world and what's keeping you up at night.
Yeah, here in Maine, we just had a lot of concerns around the sea grant, the Maine Sea Grant, how
Yeah.
that was really supporting local fishermen. And that money sort of came back 15-fold when it was invested in our coastal communities. So it was a really huge economic driver. And so with that, that has just since been restored, which is really, I think, a positive thing for our communities here.
Definitely.
But I will say it just shows how fragile
Yeah.
vulnerable our seafood communities are. And this is an industry that we are really relying on when we, not here, just here in Maine, but across our country for seafood. The Gulf of Maine is also warming faster than any other body of water. I think more than 90% of bodies of water worldwide.
Wow.
So we look at temperature and we think, oh my gosh, that's really going to change the face of how we're fishing, how we find lobsters, and then oysters. There's more bacteria issues and all sorts of things that are going to
Mhm.
start to play into that. So those concerns keep me up at night, and just also making sure that everyone can make an honest living out of this work. But at the same time, we have really positive outlooks on what this kind of work and teaching people about our coast and how we work will transform that. I'm a big believer of the rising tide lifts all boats
Yeah.
value. And the more that we can even have people come here and attract visitors here at home,
Yeah.
drives the value of our seafood that much more. So we're putting more dollars in the pockets of our fishermen, even if that's just consumption here at home. So that's a
Yeah.
good feeling. And that's sort of a good way to know that we're a part of the solution versus, the other way around.
Yeah. Well, and education is such a huge part of that. Some of these things you mentioned are really scary. It's also an opportunity to talk about it, to bring it into the forefront, to let people know why it matters and how it's making a difference, whether that's a Maine sea grant or whether that's ocean warming. People need to know how things are being affected for all of us.
It's just learning that in warmer waters, female lobsters move further out from shore. So then the male lobsters can't find them,
Well, wow.
right? But
Mhm.
not knowing how that works, you go, oh, what's the difference? What does warming waters really mean? So that
Yeah.
education piece is really important when
Yeah.
we're learning. Mhm.
So on the other side of it, what are the biggest opportunities that you're seeing in the work you do?
Oh gosh. Well, culinary tourism is an amazing place to be. It
Mhm.
is what travelers are seeking today.
Yeah.
We what we're doing is not something really new. We're applying, traditional structures that the wine industry created
Yeah.
around tasting rooms and around nuance and flavor. And we're applying that to oysters. So the innovation work that we do is really is sort of bridging other food industries into what we do, and how we're elevating oysters as a lifestyle and not just a product. So I think the exciting thing for us to think about is how we're creating destinations through food, how we can enrich people's, time off and their rest periods with nourishment. As nourishment is just beyond food, but story and tradition and
Yeah.
heritage. And the more that we can build into that, the more that we can really build those themes into how we travel, the more we're going to respect the environments that we do have. So
Yeah.
I don't have to tell anyone the doom and gloom of climate, or, maybe, those are sensitive issues for many,
Yeah.
but and people behind it is already enough to say, wow,
Yeah.
I really want to protect this. So I think that's like the most powerful, wonderful thing in our business. And there's a lot of cool innovation around just like real-time travel data, AI, how we're finding people who want our experience. There's a lot of cool
Yeah.
technologies out there for us to even attract that kind of traveler. So we're doing a lot of
Yeah.
work behind the scenes on that too.
Yeah, what an exciting time. Oh, despite some of the more challenging things that are happening, it's an exciting time with some of the possibilities with technology and how the world is changing.
It for an entrepreneur who's only has so many hands and
Yeah.
maybe a couple of interns right now,
Yeah.
you know, these these AI components are actually really amazing for this
Yeah.
level. We think of it as like big data ideas, and
Yeah.
it's really like, how can I make a plan faster? How can I build a chart faster? How can I do these things that would take me all day? So I think
Yeah.
it's so much more done and so much more progress.
I think the real value, particularly for entrepreneurs in AI, is in what it allows us to get done in a day and how much faster we can scale with the right tools right there at our fingertips. It's
Exactly.
incredible.
And that's what we wanna do. We wanna grow our team. We wanna be able to focus on the human capital that we have in our business, because it's all about, what's in our brains, what we know, all of our experiences to share with other people. But we wanna get all the accounting out of the way so we can do that more happily and effectively.
It's incredible too. I talk to leaders across industries specifically for this series that I do. And this concept of story and tradition and heritage, it comes up across every medium. I think it's something that humans, we just are naturally drawn to want to understand our past and our connection to the earth and how, our time on this planet is impacting the future. I think it's so interesting how you could take something so diverse concepts from art to oysters and the same concepts sort of emerge.
It's so true, Cassie. I think that in any object, in any space, we can learn something about where we come from. And it takes a lot of effort to try and create that space for people to learn and understand, but you can do that from anything. Oysters, it's just picking one up out of the water and holding it, and then having someone teach you how a shell grows, and what the anatomy is, and how to eat it
Yeah.
properly. That is just mind blowing to people today. And it also takes us into the present and away from a lot of these distractions that we have today.
Yeah, definitely. No phones on the what do you oyster shelf? What do they call the farm area?
Well, you've got the lease. So we
Yeah.
lease water when we grow oyster.
Oh, interesting. That.
Yeah, well,
Right.
here's the crazy part. We all do, right? We all get to decide
Yeah.
how our waters are used, whether it's recreation or aquaculture or anything else. We all have a say. So it's also a really cool space to be like, I deserve to get to see this and how this works. Just neat too.
Yeah, very cool. I do hear from a lot of people, as I told you earlier, who are really thinking about the work they do and how they're contributing in this world. So, what advice do you have for others who may be standing on the edge of a big decision, thinking about what comes next for them? What would you want these people to know?
You know, it's hard to sometimes figure out what it is that you want to do with your life, and there's
Yeah.
this area, and sometimes we think it's so obsolete. If I'm going to leave my big corporate career, it better be for something I want to do for the rest of my life. We create this sort of all or nothing feeling around us, and that's so much pressure. It's unfair to think that we have to choose from one sort of path of a career versus breaking out on our own and doing something. I had that a lot. And what I would say is, it's okay to test. It's okay to play and be creative. And if you have a great idea and you're really passionate about it, go for it. And if it fails, the worst thing you're going to do is go back to the way that work was before. That
Yeah.
resume doesn't go away. That is always going to be there for you. So even in the work I do now, if ever there was a moment where this all went belly up, I am only proud of the fact that I tried, and I know that there will always be a space for me to return to another profession. So I think that's a really important thing for people to think about as they're going through, what is the one thing I love? I must do that for the rest of my life. I must bake bread until I retire.
Yeah.
No, just bake bread for a while, see if you like that. And if it works out well, great. If it doesn't, you tried. I guess that's my biggest advice is you give yourself a lot of grace in the work that you want to do or as you decide what your future could look like.
Thank you. That's fantastic advice. And I will also heed that advice. If people are interested in the work you're doing or interested in your book, where can we find you? Where can we follow you? And then when is your book coming out?
Yeah, so the book is called Oyster Society. I'm very excited. It's a narrative nonfiction, and it is due to be published by next summer. So 2026 is the goal. You can find me at Lady_Oyster on Instagram. That's where we do a lot of engagement of the work that we do and storytelling. You can come see me in Maine. We are a food tour company, so we're a little bit mobile, but we mostly work in Phippsburg, which is just about an hour outside of Portland. And www.theladyoyster.com is where you'll find all of our wonderful experiences if you'd like to come visit.
Well, I'm going to get up there this summer and check it out for sure. And I just really appreciate you coming on today and just sharing your story and being so vulnerable. I think it's going to be super helpful for everyone to hear your story. So thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. It just means the world to be able to share it and to give the reality of this space, but it's also so rewarding. So I wish it for everyone.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Virginia.
Cassie, bye.